How did the company that built Silicon Valley end up fighting for survival? This is the greatest failure in the history of computer chips. 20 years ago, Intel Inside meant quality. Intel invented the microprocessor. Intel basically was the personal computer. At one point, 9 out of every 10 computer chips on Earth came from this one company. Today, Intel is a company that lost almost $19 billion in a single year. A company whose CEO was publicly told to resign by the President of the United States. A company that needed a government bailout just to stay standing. How did the business that built the digital age fall this far? And can it ever climb back? Let's break it down. To understand how far Intel fell, you have to understand how high it flew. Intel was founded in 1968 by Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore. Yes, the same Moore behind Moore's Law. The company bet everything on becoming the engine of modern electronics, and it paid off big. The real takeover happened in the 80s and 90s, under a third CEO, Andy Grove, who turned Intel from a memory chip maker into the processor company. That's when the Wintel partnership with Microsoft was born, a duo that shaped what a personal computer even looked like for decades. By the late 90s, Intel wasn't just a company, it was the standard. Every PC maker needed that little Intel Inside sticker, or buyers got suspicious. And the business model was a money machine. Intel designed its own chips and built them in its own factories. This is called an IDM, an integrated device manufacturer. Competitors like AMD were left fighting for scraps. Intel kept winning through the 2000s. Sure, there were stumbles, the infamous Pentium math bug in the mid-90s, the failed Itanium chip line. But every time, Intel found a way to bounce back on top. It felt like nothing could touch them. Then, the industry started to change, and Intel didn't notice in time. The first warning sign came in 2007, and Intel ignored it. When Apple was building the first iPhone, it reportedly talked to Intel about making the chip. According to people familiar with the situation, Intel's leadership looked at the expected sales numbers and decided it wasn't profitable enough for their business model. They passed. That decision turned out to be one of the most expensive mistakes in tech history. The smartphone market exploded, and all of it went to a different chip design called ARM, not Intel's own x86 architecture. Qualcomm, MediaTek, and later Apple's own in-house chips grew on a market Intel basically handed away for free. Intel tried to catch up. There was a mobile chip line called Atom. There were billions in subsidies paid to phone makers just to get an Intel chip inside their devices. None of it worked. By the mid-2000s, Intel quietly shut the mobile effort down. This wasn't just a missed niche market. It was the first sign of a bigger problem. A company culture built around one dominant market, desktop and server chips, that couldn't see where the rest of the industry was heading. The second, much more painful hit came from the one place Intel had always dominated, chip manufacturing itself. For decades, Intel led the industry in something called process node. Basically, how small you can make the transistors packed onto a chip. Smaller transistors mean faster, more power-efficient chips. This was Intel's crown jewel. Then came the move to Intel's 10-nanometer process. It was supposed to ship around 2016. In reality, it didn't reach mass production until 2019, years late. In an industry where rivals shrink their chips every couple of years, falling 3 or 4 years behind is like losing an entire era. While Intel was stuck, a Taiwanese company called TSMC, a contract chip maker that manufactures for other companies instead of designing its own chips, kept improving. TSMC doesn't design processors. It builds them for whoever pays. Apple, AMD, Nvidia, anyone. That focus let TSMC pour every resource into one job, manufacturing, and it pulled ahead of Intel, node after node. That created a snowball effect. AMD, which used to run its own factories and lagged badly behind Intel, switched to a fabless model, printing its chips at TSMC instead. Suddenly, AMD was competitive again, sometimes even ahead. AMD's Ryzen processor line, launched in 2017, gave regular consumers a real alternative for the first time in years, both on performance and on price. Then there was NVIDIA. While Intel stayed focused on traditional processors, the explosion of artificial intelligence created massive demand for a totally different kind of chip: graphics processors built for training AI models. That entire market went almost entirely to NVIDIA. Intel was late here too. Its own attempts at AI accelerator chips couldn't keep up. Bottom line, the company once famous for manufacturing supremacy became a laggard in PC chips, server chips, and AI chips, all at once by the early 2020s. In 2021, Intel's board decided drastic change was needed and brought back Pat Gelsinger, an engineer who had spent nearly 3 decades at Intel and had worked on some of the company's most important chip designs. Gelsinger unveiled a bold plan called IDM 2.0. The idea: Intel wouldn't just fix its own manufacturing, it would open its factories to outside customers, going head-to-head with TSMC directly by becoming a contract chipmaker itself. At the same time, Intel promised to leapfrog several generations of manufacturing technology in a very short window. This plan came with serious government money attached. The United States, worried that the world's most advanced chips were being made almost entirely in Taiwan, a couple hundred miles from China, passed the CHIPS Act, a law designed to bring chip manufacturing back to American soil. Intel received billions of dollars in subsidies to build new factories in Arizona, Ohio, and other states. Washington viewed Intel as the only American company capable of bringing leading-edge chip production back home. This stopped being just a business story and became a national security story. But building factories at that scale takes enormous upfront capital, tens of billions of dollars, at the exact moment Intel's core business was already struggling. That created a gap. Money for new factories had to be spent now, while revenue from those factories was years away, if it ever came, since Intel still needed to find major new customers for its contract manufacturing business. The financial results under Gelsinger were brutal. In 2024, Intel posted a net loss of $18.8 billion, the worst in company history. The stock lost about 60% of its value. For the first time in 30 years, Intel cut its dividend. The company's market value dropped below $100 billion, at a time when NVIDIA, for comparison, was worth trillions. In December 2024, the board decided to part ways with Gelsinger. The long-term strategy may have been right, but the board and the market had run out of patience to wait for it to pay off. In 2025, Intel named a new CEO, Lip-Bu Tan, a longtime semiconductor industry veteran originally from Malaysia. His job was simple to describe and brutally hard to do: fix what Gelsinger couldn't, get manufacturing back on track, and win back customer trust. Then things got politically messy in an unprecedented way. In the summer of 2025, President Donald Trump publicly called for the new Intel CEO to resign immediately, citing his past business ties to Chinese companies. That statement hit Intel's already shaky stock hard. The conflict was eventually resolved differently than the market expected. Instead of a resignation, the U.S. government struck a deal that gave Washington a direct ownership stake in Intel, a move that would have looked unthinkable for an icon of American private capitalism in normal times, but one that shows just how important Washington considers keeping Intel alive as a national chipmaker. By early 2026, the financial picture is still shaky. In the fourth quarter of 2025, Intel's revenue fell about 4% year over year, though earnings per share actually beat Wall Street's expectations, mostly thanks to cost cuts, not sales growth. On the earnings call, Tan was blunt. Getting Intel back on track will take time and discipline, and it's a multi-year journey. He also confirmed that manufacturing problems are still holding the company back from reclaiming its old position in the industry. The foundry business, the contract manufacturing unit that was supposed to be Intel's big comeback bet, posted an operating loss of $2.3 billion in the first quarter of 2026 alone. This division was meant to become Intel's answer to TSMC. So far, it remains a deeply unprofitable cost center. Put the whole story together, and it's not one mistake. It's a chain of management decisions and structural problems. A string of bad management calls, from turning down the original iPhone chip deal, to repeatedly missing manufacturing deadlines, to reacting late to both mobile and AI. Over and over, Intel's leadership made calls that looked reasonable in the moment, but cost the company years it never got back. A years-long technology gap measured in nanometers. While rivals shrank their chips on schedule, Intel's transition to smaller, more advanced nodes ran years behind plan, handing manufacturing leadership to TSMC and letting AMD catch up almost overnight. A culture built around defending one dominant market, PC and server chips, that struggled to spot new markets in time. Mobile first, then AI chips. Combining chip design and chip manufacturing in one company, once Intel's biggest advantage, turned into a burden once the manufacturing side fell behind. Specialized rivals, TSMC in manufacturing, NVIDIA and AMD in design, could out-execute Intel simply by focusing on one job instead of two. Slow decision-making inside a huge, bureaucratic company, in an industry where your window to catch a technology trend is measured in a couple of years, not a couple of decades. And finally, decades of success meant nobody at Intel seriously questioned whether the good times would keep rolling. That sense of invincibility became a risk in itself. The company kept reacting late because it had always managed to catch up before. So why is Intel even still standing? Government money. The CHIPS Act put billions of taxpayer dollars behind Intel, specifically because Washington doesn't want the world's most advanced chip manufacturing controlled entirely by Taiwan. That funding, plus the direct government ownership stake struck in 2025, is effectively life support while Intel tries to fix its manufacturing and win back customers for its foundry business. It's a strange twist. The same company that once symbolized private American capitalism at its most dominant now depends partly on government backing to survive. So, can Intel actually get its crown back before the end of this decade? The honest answer? It's possible, but far from guaranteed. Intel still has real advantages: decades of engineering experience, government backing that isn't going away, and factories that are already paid for and under construction. If the newest manufacturing processes finally hit their targets on schedule, and the foundry business lands major outside customers, Intel has a real shot at becoming a top-tier player again. Maybe not the undisputed king, but a serious contender. But a shot isn't a guarantee. The last 20 years prove one thing clearly: catching up in the chip race is far, far harder than leading it. Intel's story is a warning. The market can forgive a company for one mistake, even two. What it doesn't forgive is missing an entire technology shift: mobile, contract manufacturing, three waves that passed by a company that used to always be first. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, hit like and subscribe. Next time, we'll cover how TSMC and NVIDIA's rise is basically the mirror image of Intel's fall.